What is up YouTube? My name is Sam and I work under the artist name of Kaiyo. So I've been working on this track for a couple of weeks now and I'm just about happy with how it's all come together, and I thought I would do a quick breakdown of how I made it and what's going on in the project. So I'll just play a quick preview here and then we'll jump into FL Studio and see what's going on. Regular listeners might notice that you've heard this beat before. This is the beat that I used when I did my how to arrange your beats video. I'll just link that up here somewhere. What I'm actually going to do in this video is break down all of the different elements that make up the track rather than how to arrange the track. Let's jump into the file and see what's going on. So here is the project file and you'll see here there is a fair bit going on, but it's not an overly complicated beat. I started this beat with my favorite piano plugin, and that is the Imagiro Piano 2, and I wrote down these chords here. Really nice, warm, dreamy kind of feel to them. And you'll notice here that there is a bunch of notes that I've taken out of the chords. And that's because of the way that I work. When I write these chords, what I tend to do is build the melody and the chords in tandem, and then I will separate that melody out into another track so that I can mix it and process it slightly differently. It also means that you can introduce the two elements to different parts of the track. In terms of processing on the piano, what we've got going on here is an EQ, just rolling off those lows, and OTT that's on with a depth of about 26-25%. That just adds a little more character and a little bit more compression to the sound. Like I said, after working on that, I then went on to the melody. I've split that out here into its own tracks so that I can mix and process it ever so slightly differently. Together, they sound like this. So now we've got this really nice, intricate piano melody that is starting to build some character in the track. I use the same piano, I just split it out, and then to process that, just another EQ, but this time rolling off some of those highs as well to give it a slightly more condensed sound. After I had those sounds, I wanted to start building the layers, so I moved on to a pad. As we can see, this is really simple, playing here a C major 7, or a couple of the notes from a C major 7, which is one of the chords from earlier. And this is just a pad that sits in the background of the mix to add some nice ambience. And we just have an EQ on here rolling off a load of frequencies that I didn't want. I wanted just like a warm middle frequency for this sound, and then a flux mini. Now this is a really nice plugin, it's completely free. And what it does is essentially sidechains the sound. You can build this to be as fast, as slow, or have any pattern that you would like. So if I show you here, if I just click in a bunch more, you can see that the sidechain starts going kind of crazy. And if we listen to that sound now, you get this. So you can build any pattern that you like, and that will differ in the way that it sidechains the sound. You can also mess with the speed at which it runs through the whole pattern, but I kept it fairly subtle here just to add a little bit more movement to the pad sound in the background. For the final layer that I was building at the start, I have another piano sound. This is the Labs soft piano, and all this is doing is playing that same few notes as the pad in a sort of art style. So if we listen to that here, and that just sits in the background of the mix to build those piano layers really, really nicely. So far, this is what we have. once I had these down, I wanted to start introducing some more instruments, and I felt like I really wanted to introduce a guitar sound. I wanted to keep it fairly dreamy, so I introduced this trem sound. And what this is another Spitfire Audio Labs sound, but this is the lap steel trems slow. This is playing a sort of dreamy guitar melody. You'll see what I mean when I hit play just here. So it's kind of a pad, it's got this kind of guitar sound, it's got this really lovely vibrato sound that makes it a really interesting, dreamy element to add to the track. For the processing on this trem sound, all I've got going on here is an EQ. That's just rolling off some of the frequencies that I didn't want to hear. And that just works really nicely when building up to a hook. I then introduced a second guitar in the hook, and what this is a much more bold sounding guitar. And it follows a similar pattern. They work together. This one, as you'll hear, is much sharper and much more of a top line melody, but if we listen to them together, it works really nicely. So I'll just play this new guitar here. If I play it with the tremolo sound here, so you can hear how they're playing together. For the main guitar, what I've got is an EQ rolling off those lows, rolling off quite a lot of those highs, so it's not a really sharp sound. And I then have a Valhalla Supermassive. Now this is just on the default preset, but I have tweaked it ever so slightly, turned the mix up to around 60%, and turned that density up just to add a few more echoes to the sound, so it's not just all feedback that's coming through. But other than that, it's just on the default preset. In the mix with everything else, you get this really nice build from the tremolo into this guitar being introduced into the track. And once I had these two guitar sounds, I found this really interesting guitar slide sound. And what I wanted to do with that is introduce a sort of slide before the main guitar hits to sound as if there is a guitar player playing that sound. It sounds like this on its own. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, but it's just the sound of someone sliding their fingers up and down a fretboard. And then what I did with that is I introduced it to come and hit just before that main guitar hits each time. So you get this sort of effect of someone playing the guitar. It's really subtle in the mix, but a nice little trick and something that I thought sounded really cool in this track. I then built a bass sound, and for this track I actually used two bass sounds. I've got here the Labs Opia sub bass. So if we take a listen to how that sounds on its own. Then introduced a classic 80 more acoustic sounding bass. And so those two playing together just adds a nice dynamic range for that bass, that sub frequencies, but also adds a ton of warmth to the track. But it's also a little bit more interesting having two different bass sounds hitting at the same time. So let's take a listen to how those sound when they come into the track. Just adding that warmth that you really expect to come from those bass sounds. Right, so now we pretty much have a nice range of melodic elements. It's now time to build the best part of any track, and that is the drums. I kept the drums really simple here, so we just have a kick, and then a snare, and then a hi-hat, and then I have this little bit of Foley, and that is a bottle cap sound. Now, I wanted to keep the drums fairly lively because the track is pretty upbeat, but I didn't want to do too much with them because there's quite a lot of melodic elements going on. I then introduced some transition sounds. Here we've got the first transition. A subtle transition doesn't come to like a really harsh head, and then a second transition that's a bit harsher. And the thing that I like about these two transitions is they have really long tails at the end. What that means is that they don't just hit an end, you get a really nice transition into a hook, and they add their own little layer into the start of that hook, which makes it feel just a little bit more powerful. And I then added some atmosphere. I've got this sound here that hits at the end of the transition. This is just a bell sound. Again, with a really nice long tail, so that when that hook comes in, when everything comes together, you get all these elements hitting at once. Finally, a little bit of ambience with the cymatics, life, waves, and seagulls sound. And that is it. That's pretty much everything for this first section. So let's take a listen to how this sounds. And then, as I'm sure you noticed, there is a few more things going on down this end of the track. So let's take a listen. As that hook comes to an end, we start introducing another sound. And I wanted to introduce another guitar sound. So what we've got here is a Labs Moon guitar. And what this is playing is something sort of similar to the trem with a couple of extra notes. And what it does is it keeps it fairly familiar to the listener, but also introducing something new, keeps the track interesting. This has more of an acoustic sound. So I used this to kind of lead a bridge of the track before we go into the final break. So just a really nice acoustic sound, and that's something that we don't really have in this track so far, so it was really nice to introduce something like that. And what I did is kept a couple of the elements in and then slowly broke the track down. So you'll see at the end of this hook, we pull the drums out, and then after 4 bars, we take out a few more elements to let that guitar really have its moment, and then we start building things back up before the final push of the track. And you'll notice there that you get a couple of risers come in, and what that does, it makes the listener expect the hook to come in, everything to come together for one final time. And what I actually did there was cut everything out, just stripping it back to just the piano and a guitar sound. We let that play for 2 bars, and then I made this short little drum fill to introduce that the hook is coming back in. So let's take another listen to how that sounds. It's a really nice, effective way to introduce a hook, but in a different way that you have done earlier in the track. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm really happy with how this track has come out. I actually am releasing this track coming out today, the day this video comes out. This is a track called The Place Where We Met. Pop the artwork up here, it's really cool. And I'm releasing this in conjunction with 52 Hertz Records. If you have enjoyed watching me break down this track, do let me know in the comment. Do head over to Spotify, Apple Music, everywhere, give it a listen, add it to your playlist, save it, all of those good things. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Peace.